What's up, Street Talks? Eric from the Eric Street Photography blog. So, just wanted to do a quick video in terms of giving you some practical tips and tricks in terms of how to conquer your fear of shooting street photography. I've done longer videos in the past before, but consider this a condensed version of that longer presentation. I think honestly in street photography, it's about 90% courage and guts when it comes to shooting in the streets. And there's nothing more nerve-wracking than kind of dealing with the nervousness or the anxiety or the fear of approaching a stranger, either photographing a photo with permission or without permission. Of course, at the end of the day, no one is 100% fearless. I'm certainly a lot more confident today than I was 10 years ago. But I think it's the fear which actually makes street photography fun and enjoyable, because oftentimes I know a lot of other photographers who do landscape photography and they just end up getting bored with it because it just ends up being too easy. And I think that's what sets us street photographers away from other photographers, that street photography is so difficult and it is so anxiety ridden that by having this kind of mental barriers, we're able to push ourselves creatively. And wherever we push ourselves creatively in terms of being photographers, I think that's what makes us, more confident and braver street photographers. So let's just kind of jump into it. So number one, what is the worst case scenario? Generally, when it comes to shooting street photography, I always try to imagine the worst case scenario. And I've actually kind of had the quote unquote worst case scenario happen to me. I've had people call the cops on me, yell at me, threaten to break my camera, etc., etc. But generally, in reality, the worst case scenario isn't as bad as you would think it is. Generally, 99.99% of the time, people don't really care. Most people actually quite like the attention. Other scenarios, people will just kind of yell at me or kind of criticize me, call me a pervert, whatever. But the worst case scenario, death, is generally not something that's in the cards. And I just kind of joke around with people is, if you guys ever watch a movie Fight Club, generally you'll find that most people are quite averse to violence. And I think everyone kind of should learn how to take a punch, because when I was in high school, I used to box with my friends, get punched in the face all the time. And actually, even getting punched in the face is not too bad as long as you just kind of sensitize yourself to it. But anyways, not telling you guys to go out and just get punched in the face all the time. But just know that the worst case scenario is somebody yelling at you. And also, if you're shooting digitally, the worst case scenario is you could just end up offering to delete the photograph. If someone's really, really upset, take a look at your LCD screen and just think to yourself, is it kind of worth the trouble or not? If you think it's like your Pulitzer Prize winning National Geographic shot, then maybe it's in your best interest to say, look, I apologize, I didn't mean to upset you, but unfortunately I'm not going to delete the photograph. In my experience, what doesn't work well is arguing with people saying, oh, I know my photography rights and stuff like that. And the more you try to rationalize and use laws and reason, the more upset people get. So generally the best approach is just apologize and quickly move on. Or if people ask you to delete the photograph, if you look at the photograph and it's not fantastic, just delete the photograph and everyone's happy. And let's say you delete the photograph and you really, really regret doing it. Fortunately, there's lots of deletion card readers out there, which you can use free software to recover your deleted photographs. Number two, assume everyone is your friend. Genetically and socially, human beings were kind of wired to assume that the worst case scenario, that everyone else is an enemy. And so a lot of us are risk adverse. We're fearful of strangers. When you're growing up as a kid, your parents are like, oh, don't trust the guy in the ice cream truck and the white van because he might kidnap you, etc., etc. But in my experiences, by assuming that everyone else is your friend, people tend to be a lot nicer to you. Sometimes we're talking to people at the coffee shop or waiters, waitresses, people in the service industry. You kind of forget that they're also fellow human beings with their own stresses, their own lives. They're all probably working jobs that they're not super crazy about. And so when you're out shooting on the streets, oftentimes when we're photographing our friends or close family or doing a commercial shoot, we're a lot more confident because we're expected to make images and no one's going to really get angry at us for being a photographer. So when I'm out shooting on the streets, I kind of assume it like I'm photographing my friends or my family. And generally when I'm out shooting, I do it with a smile. I'll engage with people, either talk with people beforehand or afterwards. One thing you could also do is take photos of people candidly without permission, and they kind of look at you and give you the WTF look. Then you're just like, hey, how's it going, buddy? Or something like that. And sometimes by not hiding the fact that you just took a photograph of somebody, people are a lot more comfortable in that regard. So assume everyone is your friend. Give people high fives, fist bumps, big smiles. The crazier your smile, the crazier people will be like, oh, this guy's crazy. But a smile really does go a long way. Number three, convert fear into excitement. This is probably a new idea and a concept that I've got recently. Is oftentimes we see a scene that we want to photograph and we start feeling our hearts thump, we feel the sweat going down the backs of our necks, and we just kind of become paralyzed with fear. Nowadays, what I try to do instead is anytime I see a scene or I see a person I want to photograph and I feel fearful, rather than telling myself, oh, I'm afraid I shouldn't do this, I tell myself, hey, Eric, the reason you're feeling so afraid and fearful is because you're actually excited. You want to make this photograph. And by reinterpreting my emotion and the way I feel, I just kind of get pumped up to make a shot. And similar things, I've heard this is a good technique when you're doing public speaking. If you're about to do a public talk somewhere, in front of a crowd of hundreds of people and you feel nervous, rather than saying, oh, I feel nervous, I'm going to tank this, say, hey, the only reason my heart's beating really fast is because I'm super pumped up and excited. And just also a practical tip, I'm really interested in drinking coffee and I love coffee, especially nice single origin espressos. So perhaps, taking a shot of espresso before you hit the streets is a good way for you to convert your fear into excitement and get your heart rate up and run around like a crazy person. And this, the story behind this photograph is, I was actually in Tucson, Arizona, and about to order a gyro, and I see this woman in the corner of my eye. I'm like, oh my gosh, she looks amazing, and I felt a little bit nervous to approach her, but I just thought to myself, hey, look, the worst case scenario, she's going to say no. So I approach her and I say, oh, excuse me, miss, you look amazing. I love your hot outfit. Love your red hair. I love your yellow outfit. Do you mind if I made a few photos of you? And she said, oh, you Asian people love to photograph me. Of course you can. And in the beginning, if you look at my contact sheet, she says, what do you want me to do? I said, oh, no, just show me your nails. So she's posing with her nails. And actually, shot number 3, she says, how does my makeup look? And she does the hand gesture. Click, that's what made the shot. You could also see that the first 3 shots I used the flash. The 2 after that is shot without a flash. This was shot on Kodak Portra 400 film. And you can see by using a flash, it really saturates the colors and pops the people out from the background. A lot of people often look at this photograph like, Eric, you're an asshole, you're just scaring these nice old ladies. But in reality, I think street photography is less about capturing all the photos candidly. What I think it's about is capturing photos that don't look posy. So even though you ask for permission, you can make a photo that still looks a little more candid, like this image. Tip number 4, ask for permission. So generally when we think about street photography, we think that it all has to be shot candidly. We can't interact with our subjects. We have to be like in the background like a fly against the wall. I think there are just many different ways to shoot street photography, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. One analogy I like to use is rock music. There's billions of subgenres of rock music, and every rock band or genre will say, I'm the real rock music, and all other forms of rock music is not legitimate. Street photography is the same way. I know some street photographers who like to ask for permission, some that are vehemently against it, and generally everyone's always kind of butting heads. But just kind of know at the end of the day, if you're really afraid to photograph somebody, at the end of the day, don't worry if it's street photography or not. Just you want to make a photo of them. So it never hurts to ask for permission. In this photograph, I was in LA somewhere, and see this guy in a Starbucks with this great outfit, like this red just popping at me. And I felt nervous, but I just knew to myself, I'm never going to see a guy this interesting ever again in my life, so I just have to approach him and ask rather than regretting it. So I go up to him and I started chatting to him for about 15 minutes or so. He told me he invented the internet. Don't quite believe him, but anyways, we had a nice little chat, and towards the end I said something along the lines of, oh, I know you probably get this a lot, but I love your outfit. Do you mind if I made a few portraits of you? And he said, yeah, sure. And actually, at the end of the day, he ended up being really honored that I wanted to make his portrait. So know that when you ask for permission, you also give people the power to say no. So let's say you see somebody interesting and you approach them, you ask for permission, and let's say they say, no, I don't want my photograph being taken. Then just say, oh, okay, thank you for your time, and walk away. If you ask for permission, no one's going to be like, no, screw you, and punch you in the face. Like, that's just not how it works, right? So when you're out shooting street photography, worst case scenario, ask for permission. For me, I have less regret if I ask someone for permission and get rejected than not ask at all. And in terms of this photograph, in the beginning he said, oh, what do you want me to do? And I said, oh, no, just fix your neck or your collar. And he does that. He's fixing his tie, and I took about 3 photos in total. I shot this maybe 3 or 4 years ago. If I could have done this differently in the future, I would have shot more photographs, shot some horizontal, vertical, close-ups, and further away. But essentially, I'm really glad that I asked for permission. Another practical tip you could have is say, pretend like I'm not here. And this works especially well as, let's say you see somebody drinking a coffee at a coffee shop. You don't want to be awkward and disturb them. And so you'll approach them and ask for permission and say, and they'll say, oh yeah, sure. I'll say something like, oh, excuse me, sir. You look so relaxed there enjoying your nice cappuccino. Do you mind if I made a few photos? And you can just pretend like I'm not here. 99% of people say, oh yeah, sure. Like no problem, buddy. Yeah, you could just go ahead and do your thing. And this is a photograph where you look at it and you're just wondering to yourself, oh, like this guy looks like he's about to kill you. But in reality, this is actually the contact sheet, the behind the scenes. I was with my buddy Charlie Kirk in Istanbul, and I was inside this crowded bus, and all these people, just crammed in. I see this guy look like he had these arms coming out of his head like a tentacle. So I bring up my camera, turn my flash, and I take a photograph, and everyone's all just kind of laughing like this Asian tourist is crazy. And actually, what I told the man was, "Oh, let me get a photo. Serious, no smiling." And you can see by photo number 2 is more relaxed. And by the shot number 3, he's just kind of staring at me and everyone's just kind of ignoring me. And so I think the best street photographers are the best liars. And one way you could get more candid looking photos is just tell people not to look at you. But on the other hand, people will say, Eric, you're directing people, you're telling them what to do or what not to do. Isn't that inauthentic? Isn't that not street photography? For me, street photography isn't about capturing reality. It's about capturing your own version of reality. So I feel that as street photographers, we're not bound by the same ethical laws as, let's say, photojournalists or documentary photographers, which they're trying to show reality as unscripted as it is. So for me, I have no personal qualms directing people. One photographer who's very famous, his name is William Klein, William, Klein, Klein. And yeah, he was often interact with people he met on the streets, with kids. Even his most famous kid with gun photo, you might have seen it. Kid with a gun pointing his gun straight at the camera. William Klein told the kid, hey kid, look tough. And then the kid kind of acted up for the camera. And that's what made the photograph. And he called himself like a director on the street. So I'm much more extroverted than most other people that I know. So I feel like this technique works well. No, at the end of the day, you don't have to use any of these techniques. These are just little tools that you could add to your street photography toolkit. There's no one right or wrong way to shoot street photography, so just kind of experiment and find out what works best for you. Tip number 6, photograph their hands. A lot of people might be wanted by the FBI, or they don't want their photos to show up on Facebook or social media. And especially nowadays with the internet, people are more paranoid than they were in the past. And so in this situation, let's say you want to photograph somebody, or they yell at you, or you ask for permission, they say no. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So what I'll do instead is, oh, do you mind if I just photograph your hands? And almost nobody objects to having their photos of their hands shot. So this is a photograph I shot in Paris. I took photos of a bunch of ladies, and at the end, I just made some photos of her hands. And I just feel like the details of her hands are much more emotional, much more powerful. I think sometimes hands are more expressive than people's faces. So whenever in doubt, and you're trying to build up your confidence, ask if you photograph someone's hands, just the shoes, just their outfits, or something like that. And the last tip is compliment your subject. Often if I see someone on a photograph and I ask for permission, I'll just start off by saying, oh, excuse me, sir, or excuse me, miss, I love your hat, I love your suit, I love your look. Do you mind if I made a few portraits of you? And that's kind of the shortest, most simple way to approach people. And by complimenting people, they obviously like it, because who doesn't like being photographed? But also, you kind of acknowledge that there's something unique or special about them. Sometimes if you just approach them and say, hey, can I take a photo of you? They might be a little more suspicious. They're like, oh, are you making fun of me? Why do you want to make my photograph? Etc., etc. But by complimenting them, you're kind of telling them, hey, look, you're unique, you're different. There's something special about you. I want to make your photograph. Even if somebody is not, quote, quote, beautiful in the standard traditional way, just by saying, oh, I love your look, or it looks like you've been through a lot, or you look like, it looks like you're a very strong person. These are ways that you could compliment people without giving people false compliments. Because if somebody's, very overweight and it's not looking their best, you don't want to say, oh, look, you look amazing. That's probably not authentic. But in the past, I have called older ladies beautiful because I think older women tend to have some sort of beauty and elegance behind them. So whatever you do, make sure you do it authentically. For this photograph, I was in a hotel lobby, see this dude, I'm like, this guy's amazing. And I just approach him and I was like, oh, excuse me, sir. I love your look. Do you mind if I made a few portraits of you? He said, yeah, sure. And I photographed a bunch of photos of him, shot some horizontal and some vertical. And funny enough, at the end, I'm just like asking, oh, so what do you do? He goes, I own this hotel. And I'm like, I don't believe you. But he says, yeah, go to the front counter and ask the people there. So I go to the front counter, and behind them are all these photos from the 50s and 60s of the same exact guy, same outfit, except a lot younger. And he ended up inviting me to the penthouse, offering me like, Johnny Walker Blue Label and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I had to decline because I was actually on the way to a workshop. Anyways, these are some practical tips and tricks I have for shooting street photography, building your confidence, some practical tips and tricks. These are not the only ways to do it, but these are techniques which have worked well for me. And for those of you guys who watch the video, sorry, my apologies for some of the dogs barking in the background. I'm stuck in Cindy's family's house and there's always stuff happening. Future videos, I'll try to make things more quiet. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. At the end of the day, you're not out there to upset people, bother people. Shoot from your heart, put a big smile on, and the more confident you act, the more comfortable people are going to feel. And at the end of the day, you want to live life without regrets. So these are seven quick tips to overcome your fear of shooting street photography. Until next time, guys, peace out.